Let's talk about the political and the social consequences, because the billionaire class runs the country. I mean, I described the last election as between the corporatists and the oligarchs, the corporatists embracing the Democratic Party and Biden and Harris, and the oligarchs embracing Trump. Oligarchs want something different from corporatists in that oligarchs like chaos. They want to destroy the administrative state, to quote Steve Bannon, because they make their money by setting up toll booths, in essence, between commodities. We just saw the CEO of United Health get assassinated. Who knows where that came from? And of course, it's a horrible event. On the other hand, these for-profit healthcare companies, their job, to boil it down to its moral essence, is to hold sick children hostage while parents frantically bankrupt themselves trying to save their sons or daughters, a form of terrorism, really. So let's talk a little bit about, now that it's the age of oligarchs, private equity firms, which are about destruction of capital for short-term profit. That's why they've all coalesced around Trump. Deregulation, destruction of the Department of Education. Everything will become privatized because that's how it's in its purest form, rentier capitalism. Let's talk about how these individuals with this kind of power, given their psychological makeup, how they destroy the society. At the end of the book, you talk about socialism. We're both socialists. I don't know if you're a Marxist. I'm not a Marxist. I'm kind of a Swedish socialist, but we're socialists. But talk about the political and social consequences of being ruled by the billionaire class, which we are.
We most certainly are, indeed, and that includes their corporate property. I saw in one of your previous videos how you described that 24 campaign of corporatists versus oligarchs, and I think that's thoughtful. That gets at a lot of the character of the ruling class configurations of both parties. I mean, obviously, both of them had billionaires, both candidacies, for the White House, had billionaires backing them and plenty of support from the wealth of society. But indeed, if you look at Trump, it's more Wall Street. Yes, exactly. Private equity, capital destroying to reapportion some of it, sort of hedge fund and private equity backgrounded people, all the way up to that Treasury appointment that's so important. It's true. And if you look at Harris, it is more conventional, traditional Republican and Democrat corporate support. But one thing that I think is important just to connect that is just to mention something that goes back to the statistics behind this. Just one thing I always want to make sure people realize is that, like, the corporate world and all of its $1 billion of support for Harris's failed campaign, this stuff is the property of this same ruling class. Just for people's familiarity with this, the big research we have on it comes from the economist Ed Wolf, and his estimate was that the top 1%, once again, of households owned 40% of all U.S. stocks, and the top 10% owned 84%, which is almost all of it. So even if we are indeed looking at some oligarchs fighting against more corporate-backed candidates, fundamentally all of this is the property and the domain of that rich ruling class, just to sort of add that aspect to it. But the consequences of getting ruled by them are pretty intense. Obviously, on the policy side, we've been looking at 40 years of neoliberalism, and it's meant doing nothing about climate change, even as it has completely come to us now, and we are just living in it, watching 40 years of redistribution of wealth and bringing us a long distance back to that Gilded Age level of wealth concentration. We aren't quite back there yet, based on the data we have from that time. I'd say next year's tax cut that everyone expects will probably get us most of the way there, so we'll explore that. Big consequences of these things, and not just that our middle and working class pay has stopped tracking productivity, as we all know it stopped doing in the 70s, but also just like what that does to the economy. We have bubbles in so many markets now, those unsustainable spikes and crashes in assets. Most of our markets now are insanely overheated. The market, the stock market, is ludicrously overvalued by any conventional price to earnings ratio valuation. Our real estate prices are stratospheric in this country. In any asset, cryptocurrency, the whole financial sector, they're hugely overvalued because so much of this wealth has gone back to these rich households. I tell my students, when middle class people get an income increase, We spend it on our needs. I have a health problem. Junior needs braces. Susie needs a college fund. I've got a credit card to pay down. That's what normal people do. If you're wealthy, as we've said, you already own your property. You have the assets that you need. So wealthy people, when Reagan or Bush or Trump cut their taxes so much, most of that money just gets invested. And that means that's more cash chasing the same number of assets. And it just tends to have the effect of hideously inflating every asset market, making housing out of reach for so many people, making the market absurdly overpriced, if you're concerned about that. The consequences are pretty rough, from government policy all the way to its effect on the markets.
And how does it distort the political system? I mean, you argue in the book, which I agree with, that essentially these were the people who gave us Trump.
Oh, indeed. I mean, this story has kind of hit the public how important money is. I mean, Trump runs his campaign saying he's running against the power of money, and that was one of his big switchblades in the back of all of his Republican competitors in 2016, was saying, I donate money to these people and they pick up my calls, they always do. Like, that spoke to people because it suggests a little of that Bernie Sanders populism, but with a bunch of Trump racism, so you can kind of have both. And that's, part of his successful coalition there. So these absolutely are the figures that brought us Trump. Again, you have, it's fundamentally a social democratic country, despite it all, to this day. And candidates that succeed usually at least pretend to be catering toward that. So Obama in 2008 talked all this progressive fight about codifying Roe and signing the Card Check Act to make union elections easier, all this stuff, and then backed off most of it, let Congress write the banks re-regulation, and used a right-wing Republican healthcare plan to become his signature bill. When people see that, they become cynical about left-wing approaches and kind of have abandoned the Democrats in part, I think, because of that switcheroo that they pull. Then you have figures like Clinton and Harris who refuse to even pretend, and then they're the ones that go down in flames, sadly. So watching the political parties adapt to this, the Republicans are working very hard on their working class cosplay, which is a long-standing ruling class pastime, as I review in the book, ever since we've had the wealthy, today billionaires. Back in the original Gilded Age, it was just millionaires with inflation, But ever since we've had that class distinction, these guys' favorite thing is to dress up like they're working class. And
Well, you